Hello everyone, welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. We are now at the end of March. I cannot believe our first quarter is now over. First of all, I want to apologize. These last few weeks have been incredibly boring. There's not been that much going on. We've had the war and the oil prices. The SAVE Act is dead. There's not much else going on. There's the government shutdown, which is still going on. And that's really it. There's no midterm news. And I'm just saying, if nothing happens in the next week, then we're going to have a pre-recorded episode. I'm thinking nothing is going to change, so we'll see what happens. If you've been on a plane recently, you will know just how bad airports have been recently. It's reported it could take hours to get through TSA lines in certain areas of the country. And to deal with this, the Trump administration has deployed ICE to airports across the country. I said it a few weeks ago, the administration only does anything for two reasons. It's either for oil or for immigration, and this is primarily to arrest illegal immigrants. And this is what the stated purpose is, to help with the TSA lines. And bad news is this is now the longest U.S. government shutdown in American history. Unlike the last one, which affected all government departments, this one only affects Homeland Security. But Homeland Security is a very important government department. This is now, I believe, a 45-day government shutdown, and the last one was 43, and it is still ongoing. It began on February 14th, and there are no signs that it will end anytime soon. It looked like it was going to end, but then the deal collapsed. The politics of the government shutdown has not really changed. Democrats have the same demands, Republicans have the same demands. No ground has been given on either side, and I predicted back when this started, I believe it was at the beginning of February, that this could go on for a while because no side had an incentive to concede, and that's exactly what happened. If anyone did, it would be the administration because they're the ones, quote-unquote, in charge, but it doesn't seem to be the case at the moment. The problem is Congress is now going on its Easter recess, and if they don't stick around, which it doesn't look like they will, then this is going to last at least 2 more weeks, and this would take us well over the 2-month line. We would be at about 60 days, which would be 2 months. And overall, though, of course I have sympathy for some of the TSA agents, but TSA as an agency, I have very little sympathy for them. It's time to completely abolish them. DHS did an undercover study a few years ago and found that 70% of weapons that went through TSA were not caught. Imagine failing at your job 70% of the time and still being on the job. It used to be 90%, so 70% was a big improvement, according to them. And the great irony, I think, of this whole situation is Democrats wanted more control on ICE, and the administration has now made ICE even more prominent in American cities, which the irony is quite fantastic, I think. They're going to be checking documents, and they, as I said, they are likely to be arresting more illegal aliens. So that's the great irony here. I think both sides made a strategic blunder in the last week, depending on how you interpret it. The first one assumes that Democrats actually want to change policy and they are not catering to their base. If that is the case, then Democrats were not playing smart because they were offering to fund all of Homeland Security except for ICE, and that would give away all of their leverage because ICE has been funded for the next few years and Republicans could always fund them through reconciliation anyway. The second interpretation, and this is the one that I think is more likely, is that Democrats are actually okay with what the administration is doing, at least not in principle, but at least in practice, and they only want to cater to their base. Doing it this way, as I outlined earlier, would have allowed the government shutdown to end. ICE still remains funding, and then their hands are clean because they never voted to fund ICE. Problem with this is it will look like they shut down the government for a month and a half, almost 2 months, and got nothing in return. They kind of have done that already last year, and when they did that, they looked completely incompetent. So I was kind of thinking it would be really risky to do that again. I'll leave that up to you to decide in the comments. Was this ever about policy, or was it about messaging? Or was it a little bit of both? We do know that Democrats will not fund all of DHS because the House passed a bill on Friday to fund all of DHS for 8 weeks, but Democrats in the Senate will not go for it, so they will not vote for ICE funding, and we know that. So what was the blunder Republicans made? Well, they rejected in the House of Representatives. They rejected the deal that Democrats passed, and now they look like the obstructionist ones. It used to be Democrats, now it's Republicans. Democrats agreed to a compromise that would have essentially reopened the government without having to agree to ICE funding, but Republicans vetoed it, and I believe that was a huge mistake. So why are they so belligerent, you might wonder? Well, we kind of had warning about this a few weeks ago. I've kind of put this on your radar, I believe, almost a month ago. and it has to do with the Save America Act. It hasn't been passed, as I said at the beginning, and as for the president, Trump said, I don't think we should make any deal with the crazy, country-destroying, radical left Democrats unless and until they vote with Republicans to pass the Save America Act. And that was before he made an agreement. He caved. Trump always chickens out. He caved. He agreed to the compromise that Democrats were going to vote for, and then Republicans shot it down. He also wrote that he wanted Republicans to kill the filibuster, stay in D.C. for Easter if necessary. He wanted the Save America Act, which we talked about. The drama's been going on for a long time. And this is what I meant at the beginning when I said nothing has really changed. This is not going to work because there are not the votes for it anyway. The SAVE Act is dead. It will not be passing. That being said, Trump has signed an executive order to pay TSA agents amid the shutdown. Your first questions should be, how will he do this? Well, and that's a good one. Remember, Congress has the power of the purse in this country, and it looks like the administration is going to use the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the same thing that funded ICE last year, to pay for the TSA agents. And remember the last shutdown, they found money to pay for the military, and I guess the question for me is, if this is legal, and I don't think it is, but if it is legal, then why didn't he do this a month ago? And I think Democrats are unlikely to challenge this because if they do, they're going to be the party that doesn't want to pay TSA agents, which will make them look bad, just like if they had complained about Trump paying the military, that would have looked bad. So, doing this action, Democrats have now lost all of their leverage. TSA agents that was kind of the big public thing. People encountered TSA, especially ahead of the Easter recess. That was a huge deal, and that's a really public-facing agency, while a part of the agency, while lots of other parts are kind of more hidden. And if you remember the last shutdown, food stamps, that was a big deal, and that's kind of the more public-facing. So if you kind of neutralize that, then you can make this last as long as you want. The good news is that TSA will be paid. It looks somehow, some way. It looks like they're going to get their first check today, and first check in almost 2 months, and that will hopefully clear the clogs on our airports. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Meanwhile, the president's approval rating on the issues remains horrendous, and with gas prices now at over $4 a gallon, I expect it to get worse. The Silver Bulletin, run by the infamous Nate Silver, has immigration, last I checked a couple days ago, at -9, trade -18, the economy -22, and inflation -30. And Real Clear Politics has the overall approval rating at -14, the economy at -19, foreign policy at -14, and inflation at -25. So no matter how you slice it, it is bad. Even the Iran war is unpopular. A CBS poll had it at -20, Emerson at -7, YouGov -17, and Morning Consult at -4, etc., etc. There's very few polls that have it as a positive approval rating. I think except Rasmussen, which is not a real pollster. I think there were things that the party could have done to turn this around. I think they were always going to lose control of the House because that's usually how it goes, but I think they could have limited the damage. I really think it's too late now. I don't think anything is going to change this. Betting markets still have a strong chance for a Democratic takeover of the lower chamber, and it is leading toward Democrats taking control of the upper chamber as well, although for reasons I've explained before, that is an uphill battle, but even that's not becoming so difficult. So we have 2 more things I want to highlight before we go off into the Easter week. Firstly, and most importantly, the Supreme Court case that might change mail-in voting. It's Watson versus the RNC. Mississippi allows mail-in ballots to be counted up to 5 business days after Election Day. And if you think about it, that's actually a whole week, because you have Election Day, and then you have the 3 days after, and then you have a weekend, and then another 2 days. So that's a whole week. Mississippi was allowing an entire week for people to get their mail-in ballots in late. And the RNC sued and said that Election Day is considered to be the first Tuesday in November every even year, and ballots must be submitted to election officials by that day. And that's a federal statute. And obviously, when there's a state versus a federal government conflict, usually the federal government wins, unless it's in the Constitution. Considering that hundreds of thousands of ballots arrived late in the last presidential election, this could be a big deal. And for example, according to the Virginia Department of Elections, 73% of mail ballots that arrived late were for Kamala Harris. And another implication is for Americans living overseas, such as military personnel, because obviously they're not going to be going to the polling station while they're deployed. It's not like Iraq is going to set up a polling station in the middle of the war for them to vote. And it seems to me the Supreme Court will overturn this law, and it could end the acceptance of mail-in ballots, late mail-in ballots. Who knows? And if Democrats want to try to change this federal statute when they return to power, they could do that. Obviously, they couldn't do that until they win the presidency in 2028. So it's not going to change anything for the next 2 election cycles. But that is something to think about. And I guess the question here is the one that Justice Alito asked: how late should officials accept ballots? Apparently that's up to the states according to the defense, and in my opinion that's not good enough. For a state election, sure, but for a national election there needs to be one standard. And my guess is this is going to be a 6-3 decision. That's probably the most likely outcome. It could be a 5-4 decision if one of the conservative justices goes with the liberals. It seemed like in oral arguments the liberals were more sympathetic to the defense, while the conservative justices were more skeptical. Whatever happens, the Supreme Court will make its ruling in late June or early July at the end of the term, so there's no reason to think this decision would not go into effect before the midterm elections, and mail-in ballots don't really have to go out overseas until September, so there's plenty of time for states and localities to get ready. And then lastly, and this normally I would let this go, who cares? But there was a U.S. Representative Sherfilis McCormick, a Democrat from Florida, was found guilty of 25 ethical violations. Apparently she used FEMA disaster money for her own family's insurance company, a health insurance company, I think, to fund her election campaigns and other campaign finance violations. She's under huge pressure to resign, and I bring this up because this would free up Republicans to do a little bit more with one less Democrat. And the problem for Democrats is they badly wanted former Representative George Santos. He was essentially the cartoon congressman. They got him expelled. And logically, they can't defend this woman because if you ask me what George Santos did wasn't as bad as what this woman did. This woman is absolutely wicked for what she did. So was George Santos, but this is unacceptable. Many have already called for her to resign. Their leader wants to wait until the next ethics meeting, but expelling a member is extremely rare. Most of the time they just get them to resign or not run for re-election. 3 members that were ever expelled were from the Confederacy. One was in the 1980s, one was in 2002, and the other was George Santos. I believe that's everybody who's ever been expelled. So being expelled from the House is a big deal. So if she does go, which it looks like she will, whether she's expelled or whether she resigns, since she is in a red state, Governor Ron DeSantis chooses the date of the election to replace her. And since it's after March 15th, it's now March 30th, he doesn't have to have a replacement elected at all because we're in an even year. So that means Democrats could be down 1 seat until January. And normally this isn't a big deal, but considering how tight things are, it's a bigger deal than usual. Right now it's 218 to 214, pending 2 elections in April. So it shows just how tight things are. Republicans can only afford to lose 1 vote and still pass bills. If this lady's kicked out, then it's going to go up to 2. And at the same time, this might blow over. Who knows? I've seen a lot of scandals, and I was thinking, surely they can't survive this. And then they do. So we'll wait and see. Hopefully she does get expelled. This is an absolutely wicked woman, and she has refused to even admit wrongdoing. So that's all for now. Hopefully something exciting happens. And by exciting, I don't mean like a war. Hopefully something good, exciting happens. And we'll have to wait and see. For now, that's all. As always, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.